Conventional wisdom says that giants and dwarves are mortal enemies, and this is often the case, but it's more complicated than that. Fire giants in particular have a complicated relationship with dwarves. While they often compete for the same land and resources, they also share some similarities. Both cultures place a high value on martial training and smithcraft. They also both have a strong sense of community and love of order. While the fire giants tend to be more ruthless and prone to actions that dwarves find evil, on occasion their similarities outweigh their differences, and dwarf and fire giant communities can have friendly relations. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another incendiary episode of
The Dungeon Crashers.
I'm Guy.
And I'm Zapil. Before we get started, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our excellent D&D content. Today we are using the giant foundling background again, but we are going to play it a little loose in terms of foundling. Rather than being an orphan that was raised by giants, our young dwarf was sent by his community as an apprentice to a fire giant smith to learn the art of the fire giant smithcraft and magical runes. Our hero is a mountain dwarf. They are taller and stronger than their hill dwarf cousins and more militant. Where hill dwarves are often at odds with orcs and goblins, they also frequently live near humans, halflings, and other more friendly peoples. Mountain dwarves, on the other hand, live far away from other people, high in the mountains and tunneling deep below them. They find themselves in conflict with trolls and giants, as well as aberrations and other foul creatures from the depths of the earth. As such, they devote much training to make sure every member of the clan is able to fight such enemies. Like hill dwarves, they have dwarven weapon training, giving them proficiency with warhammers, battle axes, light hammers, and hand axes. In addition, they are also proficient with light and medium armor. They are medium-sized, standing between 4 to 5 feet tall, shorter on average than humans, but tend to stand taller than hill dwarves. Their movement speed is 25 feet, but is not slowed by wearing heavy armor. They have dark vision with a range of 60 feet, and have dwarven resilience, giving them resistance to poison damage and advantage on saves to avoid the poison condition. They also have stone cunning. When dealing with the origin of stone structures, they are considered to have both proficiency and expertise in the history skill. In older editions of the game, this was an important ability for dwarves, but has lost some of its significance in later editions. In our campaign, we extend this ability to other skills. It works with investigation when looking for traps or locks in stone structures. Arcana to notice magical runes carved in stone, or survival when tracking enemies through stone tunnels. This brings back some of the flavor of dwarves being attached to stone. In addition to training for battle, young dwarves also pursue a trade. Even nobles have proficiency with either the choice of brewer supplies, smith tools, or mason tools. And our hero is a smith by training, although just an apprentice. And dwarves speak dwarvish and common. As mentioned earlier, we are using the giant foundling background. It gives the skills intimidation and survival. It also gives strike of the giant's feat. When taking this feat, he chooses the type of giant that raised him, or in this case trained him, and that is the fire giant. Once per turn, when he hits a target with a melee or thrown weapon, he adds 1d10 of fire damage to the attack. He also learns to speak giant and one other language of his choice, and he learns goblin. Mountain dwarves get a +2 bonus to both strength and constitution. Using the point buy system, we put a 15 on strength, making it 17 with the +2 bonus. We put an 8 on dexterity. He's going to be wearing heavy armor and is going to be using thrown weapons or spells for range, so really he doesn't need dexterity. We put a 14 on constitution, making it 16 with the other +2 bonus. We put a 15 on intelligence. It will be his casting stat, and it is important for using smith's tools. We put a 10 on wisdom and an 8 on charisma. He's not particularly social and tends to be gruff and impatient.
When just a very young dwarf, just 20 years of age, so still a child, he was sent to study with one of the greatest smiths in the land. Although this was a great honor, it was also intimidating since the smith was a fire giant. His people had good relations with the fire giants for the most part. There have been some minor skirmishes over the centuries, but small enough that neither side holds a blood debt against the other, and they engage in trade and have even fought side by side on occasion. Despite this, the young dwarf was still suspicious. The fire giants have a reputation for cruelty, but his father assured him that while this smith might be a stern master, he only wants to teach, not harm. When our hero took residence in the giant's forge, he found that he was but one of many workers there. Goblins, ogres, and bugbear also labored at the forge under the giant's supervision. He was given work at the forge making buckles for armor. Though disappointed that he was not given a more challenging task, he didn't complain. The giant smith also made him train with weapons, stating in his booming voice that a smith cannot create the finest weapons and armor if he's also not a masterful user of them. He had thought his training at home was comprehensive, but he learned otherwise. He learned to wear heavy armor such as chain and plate. He also trained with a vast assortment of weapons, great swords and short swords, polearms, maces, morning stars, and many others. His favorite was the morning star. It lacked some of the finesse of a longsword, but a strong arm could move it with deceptive swiftness, and the spikes could penetrate even thick armor. In his spare time, he crafted one for himself. Unlike the ones he trained with, the haft of this was all metal, and he cunningly crafted the head to appear as a burning torch, with the flames twisted to form the spikes. Our hero begins play as a fighter. He gets 2 skills from the fighter list and chooses perception and athletics. He has proficiency with simple and martial weapons, light, medium, and heavy armor, as well as strength and constitution saves. He also gets second wind. He can use a bonus action on his turn to heal 1d10 plus his fighter level and hit points. He can do this once between rests. He also gains a fighting style, and his training has taught him to use armor like it was a second skin. He gets a defense style, adding 1 to his armor class when wearing armor. For equipment, he will use a morning star, but any D8 one-handed weapon will work. He doesn't need the versatile property because he will also be using a shield. He will wear the heaviest armor he can get and carry a few throwing weapons for range attacks, at least until he gets spellcasting next level. After a few years at the forge and gradually being given more valuable tasks, the smith finally says he's ready to begin learning proper smithcraft and begins training him in the giant art. Though he was expecting to be making arms and armor of great power, he was instead taught to make toys, little constructs that he could animate with magic. In time he learned to enjoy this and began to understand that he needed to learn to imbue items with small magic before he was ready to create items of power. At second level, he becomes a first level artificer. He gets magical tinkering, allowing him to create minor magical items that do small things like shed light, make sounds, or move around on their own. He can create a number of these items equal to his intelligence modifier, and they last indefinitely unless he uses an action to dismiss it or he creates an item beyond the maximum number he can sustain. In the latter case, his oldest item loses its magic, being replaced by the new one. Additionally, he gains proficiency with thieves' tools, learning to manipulate complex devices like locks and traps. He also gains spellcasting, gaining 2 first-level spell slots and 2 cantrips from the Artificer list. His cantrips are Green Flame Blade and Firebolt. In battle, he channels his power into his Morning Star, causing it to burst into flame, or he can throw fire from his hands at enemies who are too far away to attack in melee. Artificer are prepared casters and can prepare a number of spells equal to his intelligence modifier plus half his Artificer level rounded down, so 2 for now. And he chooses to prepare Detect Magic and Absorb Elements. If your DM allows Unearthed Arcana, there is a spell from UA60 that we use in our game that would suit this character. It's called Arcane Weapon. It is the Artificer version of spells like the Warlock's Hex, Ranger's Hunter Mark, or Paladin's Divine Favor. Its transmutation with a duration of an hour, depending on concentration, or 8 hours if cast with a 3rd or higher level spell slot. The caster chooses cold, fire, acid, lightning, or thunder, and the weapon deals 1d6 extra damage to anything it hits. This is a good spell. It lacks the extra effects that Hex or Hunter's Mark get, but doesn't limit him to a single target, so is about equal. It's slightly better than Divine Favor, but it isn't overpowered and gives melee artificers a boost that they really need. Zapiel's brother is playing an artificer in one of our games, and this has proven to be useful, but not game-breaking. Artificers can use an arcane focus for their spells, and it must be a tool that they are proficient with. When they gain infusions, they can use any item that they have infused as a focus, and that will be an excellent buff to their power. They can put it on their weapon or shield and be able to cast most spells without putting away their weapon. At 3rd level, he becomes a 2nd level artificer, gaining the ability to infuse items with magic. He can currently infuse 2 items, and will be able to infuse more at higher levels. A lot of the time I hear people talking about artificers like support characters that infuse items for their companions. This isn't that guy. Infusions are his main class feature, and he's going to use them for himself. He learns 4 infusions. The list is found in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. He chooses Enhanced Defense, letting him make his armor +1 magical, Enhanced Weapon, letting him make his Morning Star +1 magical, and these are the infusions he will use for now until he finds magical armor or weapon. His other two infusions are Enhanced Arcane Focus, adding +1 to his spell attack and save DC. This could be an alternative to one of his first two, and one he will want to use if he no longer needs infusions for armor or weapon. Lastly, he takes Replicate Magic item, choosing Bag of Holding, which will be handy when he has infusions to spare. He can also prepare another spell, and if he has already taken Dispel Magic, he will take Identify. If he took Arcane Weapon at first level, he will take Detect Magic now. Remember, he's a prepared caster, so preparing Identify is optional, since he can always prepare it after a long rest if he has something to identify. After years more practice, the smith finally seemed pleased with his work. He is now allowed to work on major projects like full suits of armor. The armor they craft is usually for giant warriors, so a major undertaking, but occasionally they will take commission for a hobgoblin chief, a dwarf lord, or a human noble. One day his master tells him that he is permitted to design a suit of armor for himself to demonstrate that he has mastered his lessons. He spends many months on the task, creating a beautiful suit of plate armor and imbuing it with powerful magic.
At 4th level, he becomes a 3rd level Artificer, gaining a specialty, and he becomes an Armorer. Armorers gain proficiency with heavy armor and smith's tools. He already has both of these, but he can choose a different tool instead, and he takes alchemist supplies, allowing him to make acid to etch patterns in armor or weapons, as well as crafting other alchemical items and substances. He gains the ability to turn his armor into arcane armor. It lacks a strength requirement for him, and he can use it as an arcane focus for his artificer spells. It attaches to him and can't be removed against his will. He can don and doff the armor as an action. The armor covers his entire body, but he can deploy or withdraw the helmet as a bonus action. Also, if he has any missing limbs, the armor replaces them functionally exactly as a normal limb. He can also choose an armor model that is either Guardian or Infiltrator. The Guardian model has Thunder Gauntlets, which count as simple melee weapons that deal 1d8 damage, and he could, if he wanted, to use Intelligence instead of Strength for his combat modifier. Creatures hit by the gauntlets have disadvantage on attacks against anyone but him until the start of his next turn. It also has Defensive Field, letting him use a bonus action to gain temporary hit points equal to his Artificer level. He can do this a number of times equal to his proficiency modifier. The Infiltrator model increases his walking speed by 5 feet and has a dampening field that gives him advantage on stealth checks, or if the armor gives disadvantage on stealth, like his plate mail, the dampening field negates that disadvantage. It also has Lightning Launcher on the chest or one of the gauntlets that counts as a simple ranged weapon with a normal range of 90 feet and a long range of 300 feet that deal 1d6 damage to the target, and once per turn he can have it deal an additional d6 lightning damage to the target. And he can use his intelligence instead of dexterity for the attack. Our hero would benefit from either, but he likes his Morning Star, and he is going to use the Infiltrator model for the increased speed and the ranged attack. I would ask the DM if I could reflavor it as a flame launcher and deal fire damage instead, just to suit the character. He could do the same with the Thunder Gauntlets. This shouldn't be a problem since fire is technically an inferior damage type to lightning or thunder. Sadly, the launcher isn't a thrown weapon, so it won't work with Strike of the Giants. He also gains a 3rd first-level spell slot. Armorers also gain spells at each spell level up to 5th that he always has prepared and don't count against the number of spells he can prepare. And the first-level spells are Magic Missile and Thunder Wave. If you want to, and your DM agrees, you could see if you can take Burning Hands instead of Thunder Wave, just for style, but Thunder Wave is possibly the better spell, so you might want to just keep it. At 5th level, he becomes a 4th level Artificer, gaining an ability score improvement or a feat, and he takes the Ember of the Fire Giant feat. This is a new feat from Big B's Glory of the Giants. It allows him to increase his strength, constitution, or wisdom by 1, and he makes his strength 18, and it gives him resistance to fire damage. It also gives him the ability to replace a single attack with a 15-foot radius sphere of flame that affects all creatures of his choice within the sphere. They must make a dexterity save with a DC of 8 plus his proficiency and strength modifier. If they fail, they take 1d8 plus his proficiency modifier in damage and are blinded until the start of his next turn. If they save, they take half damage and no blindness. This is really good. The damage is okay, and the ability to blind multiple enemies by giving up one of his attacks is great. And the DC is based on his strongest ability score. He can use this a number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency bonus, but only once per turn. He can also prepare one more spell, and Cure Wounds would be a good choice. His cantrips improve here, with Green Flame Blade dealing 1d8 fire damage to the target and 1d8 plus his intelligence modifier to the second target, and Firebolt now deals 2d10 damage. At 6th level, he becomes a 5th level Artificer, gaining extra attack, being able to attack twice instead of once when taking the attack action. While this will often be better than casting Green Flame Blade, there are times when the cantrip will be better. He can only use Strike of the Giants once per turn anyways, so if he has a second target with Green Flame Blade, he might be better off using it than making 2 attacks. He gains a 4th first level spell slot and 2 second level spell slots. Artificers are ritual casters, so he does not need to prepare spells like Detect Magic and Identify that he can cast as rituals to free up for room for some second level spells. He would also like Heat Metal and Web. As spellcasters, both armorers and artificers in general are better at battlefield controls than damage dealers. They have some spells to deal damage, but not compared to a wizard or a sorcerer of the same level. Armorers are also melee characters and deal damage with weapons, so using his spells to make the enemy easier to fight is probably a better way to use spell slots than blasting. He does get some good damage spells, and there are always times to use them. From Armorer, he gets Shatter and Mirror Image, always prepared. As usual, you could see if your DM would swap Shatter with a fire spell like Scorching Ray if you are going all in on the fire theme. But this might be hard to sell because Scorching Ray is generally stronger than Shatter. Having Mirror Image is great. He is already very hard to hit, and the duplicates add another layer of protection.
Having completed his training, his master lets him return to his home to ply his trade, but instructs him to return eventually for further study. His journey home was not without incident. He was traveling the Dark Ways, which are tunnels deep below the mountains that connect the minds of his people with the Hall of the Fire Giants, but also to the Underdark. He ran afoul of a band of Dark Elf slavers. He never found out if the drow thought him an easy target or a foe to be feared, but in either case they attacked him. He fought with all the skill he had learned, training with the giant and the fury of an angry dwarf. His morning star swung swiftly and struck hard, unleashing blasts of magical fire. He shrugged off the poison the drow tried to use against him and countered with his magics. When the battle ended, all of the Dark Elves lay dead. He collected such items of value that they carried, and anything that might give him a clue to their purpose, and continued his way home. When he reaches his people's holdings, he finds that his encounter with the Dark Elves was no matter of chance. His clan was in a full-fledged war with the drow. The Dark Elves had abducted some dwarf children, and his clan wanted not only to rescue the youngsters, but to annihilate the drow in retaliation. Though he had come home to ply his trade as a smith, he instead found himself in the role of warrior, joining his clan in a great war. At 7th level, he becomes a 2nd level fighter, gaining Action Surge. One time per rest, he can take a section action on his turn. This is a signature ability of fighters and can allow for some really explosive turns. At 8th level, he becomes a 3rd level fighter, gaining a martial archetype. The training he received from the giant included instruction in giant rune magic, but he had never successfully mastered it. But during the extended fighting against the Dark Elves, something clicked in his mind and he unlocked the power, and he became a rune knight. Normally, when taking the subclass, he would gain proficiency with smith's tools and learn to speak giant. He already has those, and unlike many of these features, it doesn't say he can take something instead, but ask your DM. It shouldn't be too much to ask. But if your DM says no, it's fine. He has enough tools and languages already. He gains Giant's Might. A number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency modifier, he can unleash his giant power. If he is smaller than large and has room to change, his size becomes large. He has advantage on strength checks and saves, and once on each of his turns, one of his attacks with a weapon or an unarmed strike can deal an additional 1d6 damage. This has weapon attack, not melee weapon attack, so this can work with a thrown weapon, as could his Strike of the Giant. But unlike the Strike of the Giant, this would work with his lightning launcher as well. He also becomes a rune carver. He knows 2 giant runes, and after finishing a long rest, he can touch a number of items equal to the number of runes he knows, and inscribe each of those items with a different rune that he knows. The item must be a weapon, armor, piece of jewelry, or something else that can be worn or carried in his hand. The runes he knows are the fire rune and the stone rune. When carrying an item inscribed with the fire rune, he has double proficiency on any skill check he makes with a tool. Additionally, when he hits a creature with a weapon attack, he can invoke the rune and summon fiery shackles. The target takes an additional 2d6 fire damage and must make a strength saving throw or be restrained for 1 minute. While restrained, the target takes 2d6 fire damage at the start of each of its turns, and at the end of each of its turns it can repeat the saving throw, dismissing the shackles if it succeeds. When carrying an object inscribed with the stone rune, he has advantage on insight checks, and his dark vision is extended to 120 feet. When a creature he can see ends its turn within 30 feet of him, he can use his reaction to invoke the rune, forcing the creature to make a wisdom save, and if it fails, the creature is charmed by him for 1 minute. Its speed is reduced to 0, and it is incapacitated. The creature can repeat the save at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on the save. Important note that unlike many charm abilities, this doesn't end when the target is attacked or takes damage, so feel free to beat on them while they're helpless. He can invoke each rune once and can invoke them again after taking a short or long rest. The save DC equals 8, plus his proficiency modifier and his constitution modifier. At 9th level, he becomes a 4th level fighter, getting an ability score improvement or feat, and this gets a little tricky. He needs strength, intelligence, and constitution for his abilities. Since his intelligence is 15, we'll use 1 point to make it 16, and then put another point on strength to make it 19, and we'll raise that later with a feat. At 10th level, he becomes a 5th level fighter. He would gain extra attack, but he already has that from armor. At 11th level, he becomes a 6th level fighter, getting an ability score improvement or feat, and he takes the Heavy Armor Master feat. This will let him cap his strength at 20, and when wearing heavy armor, he reduces all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage he takes by 3. This doesn't save from non-magical weapons, which means it applies to any damage of those types. After his clan had their revenge on the Dark Elves and recovered their stolen children, he plies his trade as a smith for many years, gaining quite a reputation among dwarves, but also among humans and other people who appreciated the craft. In time, though, he finds that he has reached the pinnacle of his skill, and wanting to become better, he returns to the giant for further instruction. The giant was pleased to see him, saying that he knew the young dwarf would return eventually, and after some pleasantries, our hero returned to his labors at the giant's forge.
At 12th level, he becomes a 6th level Artificer, gaining a tool expertise, allowing him to double his proficiency bonus on checks involving tools. He already has a similar ability from the fire rune he has inscribed on his weapon, and they don't stack, but this is helpful if he doesn't have his weapon in his possession. He can also prepare one more spell of 2nd level, and Pyrotechnics would be a good choice, either giving him an additional way to blind enemies or the ability to heavily obscure an area, protecting from attacks by archers or other spellcasters by denying them a line of sight. He learns 2 more infusions and can confuse 1 more item. And he can also learn more powerful infusions, and he learns Radiant Weapon and Repulsion Shield, which he applies to his weapon and shield. Radiant Weapon gives the weapon a +1 magical bonus. It has 4 charges, and when he is hit with an attack, he can expend a charge to cause the creature that hit him to make a Constitution saving throw against his spell's DC, or be blinded until the end of its next turn. The weapon can also shed light on command, creating bright light in a 30-foot radius and dim light in another 30 feet. The Repulsion Shield makes the shield a +1 magical item. It has 4 charges, and after being hit with an attack, the wielder can expend 1 charge to push the attacker 15 feet away. The shield regains 1d4 charges after a long rest. Now his 3 infused items are his Radiant Morningstar, his Repulsion Shield, and his +1 plate mail. If he has found magical items that are better than these, he might choose different infusions or place infusions on different items. Also, depending on your DM, he might be able to craft permanent magical items that don't require his infusions. At 13th level, he becomes a 7th level Artificer, gaining Flash of Genius. When a creature within 30 feet of him, including himself, makes an ability check or saving throw, he can use his reaction to add his intelligence modifier to the roll. He can do this a number of times per day equal to his intelligence modifier. He also gains a 3rd 2nd level spell slot. At 14th level, he becomes an 8th level Artificer, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he increases his Constitution to 18. This will improve his save DC for his runes and make him more durable. He can prepare an additional spell, and a utility spell like See Invisibility or Enhanced Ability would be a good choice to have. At 15th level, he becomes a 9th level Artificer. From Armorer, he gains armor modifications. He can now count his armor as separate components for purposes of enchanting them. They have the breastplate, which gets armor enchantments, the special weapon, the helmet, and the boots. He also can infuse 2 additional items, but they must be a part of the armor. He places his enhanced weapon infusion on his lightning launcher or thunder gauntlets, and the enhanced spellcasting focus on his helmet. He gains 2 third-level spell slots and can prepare third-level spells. From Armorer, he gains the spells Lightning Bolt and Hypnotic Pattern, always prepared for free. Hypnotic Pattern is a great battlefield control spell, and Lightning Bolt is an excellent area of effect damaging spell. If you are continuing the fire theme, you could ask your DM if you can replace Lightning Bolt with Fireball. This isn't too unreasonable, even though Fireball is usually considered a better spell. At this level, wizards and sorcerers have more powerful spells, so this shouldn't be a game-breaking decision. But if your DM says no, that is okay. Lightning Bolt is still a very good spell. Some good third-level spells to prepare are Blink, Fly, Haste, and Dispel Magic. One spell that could be handy is Catnap, which essentially gives the party the benefit of a short rest in only 10 minutes. This would refresh his runes, Second Wind, and Action Surge, and if he has companions like warlocks, monks, or other fighters that benefit from a short rest, it is even stronger.
After some years at the Giant's Forge and learning many secrets, he once again thinks of returning home, but the giant has a request. He tells our hero that in the mountains to the north is an abandoned mine that has been occupied by a vampiric warlock and his horde of undead minions. The mine contains a cache of adamantine ingots that the giant needs to forge great weapons, but the tunnels are too small for the giant to enter. He tells our hero if he can recover the rare metal, the giant will share it with him and teach him the secrets of forging it. Our hero is intrigued by the offer, but thinks it foolish to go alone, and the giant agrees, but tells him that there are others in the giant's service who would join him. A hobgoblin wizard, a Goliath warrior, and an orcish forge priest all owe the giant favors and would be able to accompany him. With the promise of sturdy comrades, our hero readily agrees. At 16th level, he becomes a 7th level fighter. From Rune Knight, he gets Runic Shield. When another creature he can see within 60 feet is hit with an attack roll, he can use this reaction to make the attacker re-roll the d20 and use the new roll. He can do this a number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency bonus. He also learns a new rune and can learn more powerful runes, and he chooses the Storm rune. While wearing an item with a Storm rune, he cannot be surprised unless he is incapacitated, and he has advantage on Arcana checks. He can also invoke the rune to enter a prophetic state for 1 minute or until incapacitated. While in this state, whenever a creature within 60 feet of him that he can see makes an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check, he can use his reaction to give that roll advantage or disadvantage. He can evoke this one time, and it renews when he takes a short or long rest. At 17th level, he becomes an 8th level fighter, getting another ability score improvement or feat, and he will increase his intelligence to 18. This will improve his spell attack and save DC, and also allow him to prepare an additional spell. At 18th level, he becomes a 10th level Artificer. He gains Magic Item Adept. He can attune up to 4 items, and if he crafts a magic item that is common or uncommon, it costs him a quarter of the normal time and gold. Depending on your DM, this can be not useful at all or very good. If your DM is on board with crafting, he can use his downtime to turn the party's wealth into a collection of magic items suited to their needs. If your DM isn't a fan of crafting or doesn't give players a lot of downtime between adventures, it won't do much good at all. He also learns 2 more infusions, and they can be of higher power. He learns Replicate Magic Item for both Cloak of Protection and Winged Boots. If flying is frequently useful, then he will put winged boots on his armor. If his fly spell is meeting all of his needs for flying, he will instead create a Cloak of Protection to further strengthen his defenses. He also learns another cantrip, and he will take Thorn Whip. Ask your DM if you can reflavor it to look like an iron chain or something similar. At 19th level, he becomes an 11th level Artificer and gains Spell Storing Item. After a long rest, he can touch an item and store a spell from the Artificer list in that item. He can use the spell in the item a number of times equal to twice his intelligence modifier before it is exhausted. Another creature can use the item. If they do, they use his spellcasting modifier, and if the spell requires concentration, the creature must use their concentration to maintain it. What spell to use depends on a lot of things. It says on the Artificer list, so your armor spells won't work by rules as written, but it wouldn't be unreasonable for your DM to allow it. If so, Shatter would be a good choice, or Scorching Ray if your DM allowed you to substitute that. And if your DM allowed you to use Arcane Weapon, that would be an excellent spell to store. If none of these apply, Cure Wounds in a second level spot would be great to have 8 times a day. He also gains a third level spell slot. At 20th level, he becomes a 12th level Artificer, gaining an ability score improvement or feat, and he could benefit equally well from capping his intelligence or constitution. We think constitution will give a little more value, but either would be a good choice. The band of warriors make their perilous trek to the northern mountains without much difficulty. All of them were former apprentices of the giant. The Goliath had come to study the rune magic and was much more skilled in it than our hero, and was also a talented smith and a mighty warrior. The wizard was a transmuter with the power to forge items from pure magic and alter the world around him. The orc had come to the giant to honor her god by serving at the finest smithy in the realm. All were armored in enchanted plate and bore weapons of power. There was little that could stand in their way. When they reached the mines, they strode in boldly, but found that their confidence might have been premature. The mines swarmed with vampire spawn, mummies, and even fouler undead. The fight was terrible, but our heroes prevailed, and at last they found themselves at the vampire lord's sanctum. They steeled themselves for the battle to come and pushed through the doors to finish their quest. We think this is a fun character to play. Very difficult to harm with an armor class in the mid-20s, and spells such as Blink and Mirror Image for even more protection. He is vulnerable to spells and effects that require saving throws, which can be a liability. He has powerful melee attacks and has spells and abilities to be useful at range as well. He can be a good battlefield controller with spells like Web and Hypnotic Pattern and a high save DC. His runes have incredibly powerful effects, and his save DC is also high for those. He is strong and versatile with the capacity to heal, restore, and even revivify, while also having spells to deal good damage. If allowed the opportunity to craft magic items, he becomes even more powerful and versatile. We hope you enjoyed this character and will tell us about it in the comments below, along with any questions, suggestions, and build ideas. And we hope you join us next time when we continue our exploration of Bigby's Giants. Until then, cheers!